Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. So, hello and welcome to my birthday. I am filming this like very last minute. I would have liked to, do my hair and potentially take a shower. I think there are probably stains on this sweater, but we're here, and that's important. So anyway, when this posts, it will be my birthday, which is, very exciting, sort of like mildly exciting, maybe. But to me, it is exciting news because usually on my birthday, I have a practice of making things available to people. I like to give things more than I like to receive things. That's not always true, not in every context. But anyway, so the first thing, and I happened to pick up a copy that got damaged in the mail, is Grow Your Own Optimist! Exclamation point, which is my next Which Way anthology. So my first anthology, which is, this was the first one. The answer you were looking for is yes. It was very much, these are different eras of storytelling for me. So these are very much like romance. They're about a romantic relationship. They're longer stories. They're very like Hallmark rom-com style stories. These are not. So these are the stories that I wrote starting with, when was this first one written? First story, which is one of my favorites. It's called Love in the Time of Dystopia. And so it published May of 2020, which means I wrote it in March of 2020, which you may recall was a tenuous time in all of our lives. And it's actually funny now because the story is about a bunch of chefs, like reality TV show amateur chefs that are trapped in a house together. And it's funny because I speculated about how the pandemic would end, and I was very wrong. Like my initial draft was like, it's been months and we still aren't out of lockdown. And it was like, anyway, these stories are like, basically I was trapped in my house, unsure what was happening in the world, not sure what was happening with my writing career at this time. When I wrote this, I had just finished the Atlas 6. The Atlas 6, you may recall, was originally published on my birthday in 2020. So I wrote this, a month after that. And it was at the same time that I was writing My Mechanical Romance, but it was before My Mechanical Romance sold. So it was definitely in a time when I was like, what is the meaning of life? Does it matter if I never accomplish anything / will I ever accomplish anything? And then also, what does it mean to be human in this weird collective crisis? And then, the stories after that were written during the 2020 presidential election, which was, again, a very tenuous time. My pregnancy, to call that time tenuous is an understatement. Pregnancy is something that I would never do again. Many of you have heard me say that. So yeah, Grow Your Own Optimist. Not necessarily romantic relationships. That wasn't the focus. That wasn't my creative focus at the time. It was more like, what do we do about the world being very, very shitty? And how do we kind of accidentally stumble upon the bright side? So actually, there is quite a bit of humor in this collection. I would say these stories are a dark but certainly present humor. One of the stories, which is one of my favorites, is called Toxic, and it is essentially a satire about dating, in which a young woman who is using all the apps to find love accidentally stumbles upon someone who has a demon in his body, but she is very into the demon. And all her friends are like, this relationship is so toxic, and she's like, you honestly have no idea. Anyway, so it's a lot of satire. It's a lot of sort of surprise sentimental endings, because it was like, as I would come around to the ending and be like, what's important about this story and what's critical about life? It would be like, here's some sort of surprisingly sentimental conclusion about the world. So anyway, I would characterize this anthology as different than my other anthologies. It is potentially more similar to The Lover's Grimm than it is to The Answer You Were Looking For Is Yes. If you're someone who's very familiar with my work, that might mean something to you. But yeah, so that is available. pretty much wherever you buy books. It is through Which Way Press, which is a micro press. So, you know, this is a very small release, but I like it that way. Actually, I designed the cover, and my mom was like, "Why is your name so small?" And I was like, "Because I designed the cover, and that's how I like it." So anyway, what else? Also, I think that at the time this is posting, the cover for the Atlas Complex has also posted, which is really, really exciting. You will hopefully have seen the US cover, the UK cover, the Barnes & Noble exclusive, and the Waterstones exclusives all today. So like, this is a big day, yay. Anyway, I'm a huge birthday hoe, and I've already taken up a lot of time. Okay, so anyway, those are the things that I wanted to tell you about. Some things that I wanted to tell you about. What else do I have on my list? The things I have on my list. Okay, we're just gonna jump in. I don't think I have a very good, I don't have a very good segue for this. I have written down copyright infringement / merch and Owlcrate. So I've noticed that a lot of people buy Atlas 6 merch, and none of it is legal. The only things that are merch and legal are things that are like Lil Kimura's Redbubble, because she owns those illustrations, or well, like they're her illustrations that are in the books and stuff. So that is fine. It's not just fine. I encourage you to go out and buy those things. But and things that are you know, licensed through my publisher and get approval from me. So like, you know, when we do things with Fairy Loot and Illumicrate, those are obviously perfectly fine. Fox and Wit also does the like alternate covers. Those are fine. Everyone else is making merch without my involvement, which is, you know, it is what it is. I technically, Amazon, I think I may have talked about this before, so sorry if this is boring. Technically, Amazon owns the merchandising rights because they're the ones who are making the TV show. So sometimes I'll see things like, for example, Owlcrate, which is a very large book subscription company, has made a few things using the Atlas 6, and they've done it without my involvement at all. And I find this very strange, because Owlcrate is like, you would think that whatever Owlcrate is doing, they're licensing. And this, I don't want to come at this from like I don't want to make this about the money. I just think that there's a very, very slippery slope of like the copyright infringement. It creates a very slippery situation where like occasionally I saw something the other day. I saw this really beautiful like alternate cover. Like someone made a book jacket with some really beautiful art that is not legal for them to sell. And I'm not going to interfere because, you know, they're an artist and whatever. But when you do things like that, you also take on the liability of things you might not know about. So just because I choose not to go after it doesn't mean that you're not still in a very vulnerable position. And the way that that copyright infringement works, there's a lot of things that you could potentially be sued for that you may or may not own. I think we talked about this before with like AI art, and when we were talking about like indemnification through stock illustrations and stuff. Like there's a bunch of stuff that you could still be on the hook for legally and not know about because you haven't gone through the proper legal channels, etc. And normally I'm very anti-establishment, but I worry a lot about like small-time artists who do things like this, because I genuinely worry about what happens to you if someone big decides to go after you for that sort of thing. And part of my concern, like the thing that I find so interesting about this Owlcrate thing. Okay, so I got something. I saw something that they had produced. I can't remember what it was, but they had made up a crest for the Alexandrian Society. And when I saw it, I was like, did someone at Tor do this? Because why didn't anyone ask me my opinion? Like giving it a whole crest with like a Latin motto was like that felt like a lot. So then we looked into it, and they were like, oh no, Tor had no involvement with this. And then they also, I think Owlcrate's argument was that it's not copyright infringement because it's only inspired by. But in one of their forthcoming boxes, they have a blanket that is inspired by the Atlas 6. However, it uses the full knowledge is carnage quote. So not just the quote that's on the cover, not just the tagline, but the full quote, knowledge is carnage, you can't have it without sacrifice. And that to me is very interesting, because if you can do that without seeking approval from the author, and that is full on, that's intellectual property. And if you can do that without approval from the author, and you think Inspired By is going to cover it, a lot of artists who genuinely are inspired may go down that same path, and it just feels very dangerous. I think that as consumption, bookish consumption has increased, and that there is a demand for bookish merchandise, I just want you to be careful. Truly, all I'm saying is that a lot of stuff that looks fine isn't, and it's just a little worrisome to me. So yeah, so especially if you are an artist, I would encourage you to be very careful what kind of art you put out there, because you don't really necessarily know who is litigious and who isn't. This was the whole thing with fan fiction back in the day that I wasn't even really present for. But the reason that AO3 exists is because there were so many fan fiction writers who were being sued by authors. Anne Rice famously pursued a lot of copyright infringement lawsuits. So yeah, just be careful is the end of that, because it's if a company that's as legitimate seeming as Owlcrate can do things like that and really stretch the limit of what is allowed, I think it makes it really questionable what you as a consumer can do, and what you as an artist or a content producer, what are you. It's just very interesting to me. So there's no real conclusion here. I have a lot of thought exercises. I think you know this about me. So this is just something I like to think about. Be careful. Like I said, Tor is not going to go after those sorts of things. They don't have a real avenue for recourse for the most part. But Amazon does, and Amazon has a lot of resources. And if they decided to pursue something, that I wasn't involved in, that's maybe not someone you want to make an enemy of. Yeah, so just things that I've been thinking about. I honestly worry that when I have conversations about this, it's going to come off as very money grubbing. But I mean, the truth is that I can look the other way, but I think there are lots of authors who are maybe not in a position to. Or what if this book was still independently published and people were making merch off of it, and I wasn't. Not many authors, most authors are not making a lot of money. Most authors don't have a bunch of resources on their own. So it's just something that I would just, art. If we're going to talk about how much we value, last time we talked about AI art, and I just want to continue to have this conversation about valuing artists. So yeah, just a thought. The other thing I have on here, so I'm going to New York this weekend. I'm really excited about it because it's for Book Talk Fest with Barnes & Noble, and I get to basically have a conversation with some of the smartest authors currently working. R.F. Kuang is going to be there, and Tracy Dion and TJ Klune and Hannah Witten, and I'm really, really excited about this panel on world building. I've talked to Tracy a bunch about what kind of things we want to discuss, because we know each other pretty casually, and I mentioned that I think I am the author who does the least amount of world building on that panel, including Tracy, who's the moderator. And then we were talking about how I don't really think of myself as building worlds. I think of it as building systems. And we had just a really interesting conversation just about that. So I'm so excited for this panel. However, this panel also marks the first time that I'm going to be away from my son since he was born. I have not been away from my son for more than, I want to say 5 hours total. So I'm flying to New York on a red eye, going to be there for one day and come back the next day. And I'm still so nervous because something that has occurred to me that I feel like nobody really talks about. When we talk about the pitfalls of motherhood, of which there are many, there's wonderful things too, but also many pitfalls. One of the things we never talk about is the fact that once you have a baby, you are not allowed to die. And I wrote about this before in my essay, Motherhood and the Zombie Apocalypse. And I did it in a very, sentimental way then. But sometimes I think that it's actually very stressful to realize that, there's a lot of freedom to, like, I used to always joke, if there's any sort of apocalypse, then just like take me out. I have no interest. I don't want to be part of that. There are so many things that I have just no interest in living through, and it's almost a weird amount of freedom to be like, well, I'm just out. Or it used to be, because now I don't have that freedom anymore. And I think about this all the time. Like, I basically can't die. If I die, my son grows up without a mother. But it's not just that, because I'm not what I would characterize as a likable person. I'm also not what I would characterize as a person who enjoys being known, seen, or perceived. And for me, that means that if I died, there are very few people left who truly know me, who could tell my son what kind of person I was. Like, sure, he could read my books, I guess, but like, I don't know that that's a complete story yet. Maybe at some point in my life it will be, but right now, he's getting one very particular portrait of my personality. And of course, there's my husband, but like, good God, what if something happens to my husband? Um, like I don't think there are, maybe aside from my husband, there's no one who knows me as completely as I would like my son to know me. And so in addition to the concern that he won't have a mother and that'll be a presence in his life that's not felt, that I, specifically me as a human being, would not be in his life the way I would want to, which is obviously very stressful for me. So naturally, I've developed an anxiety that I'm going to die on this trip. Don't play into that delusion. But it's just this thing we never talk about, that once you become a mother, you have an anchor to this life, and sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a great thing, and sometimes it's a terrible thing. Sometimes it's a very stressful thing. I think especially if you're someone like me who has struggled with depression for much of your life, it's strange to think that, yeah, you must survive, you must live. It's really interesting, and I think this is also one of the things that factors into my. This was one of my, like, I don't know if it had occurred to me yet while I was writing this, because most of this was being written like while I was pregnant and not yet a mother. But these were the kinds of things that I was thinking about, this sort of obligation to live. What does that mean? But I just noted that I don't see it very often discussed among mothers. I think because it's like, because I'm not saying I don't value my life. I'm not coming out here to be like, yeah, I sometimes don't want to be alive, but sometimes the option to not be alive is enticing. Sometimes the option of being able to bail is like very critical to how I get through things. And it's very, it just puts things in perspective, I guess. So there's that. I'm going to move on to some other thing. What's on Tumblr? Okay. Let's see. Oh, I was wondering if you could elaborate more on your thoughts on your thoughts on time and why it fascinates you so much. I've read in several of your works, This World or Any Other, which is a fan fiction that involves time loops. The Atlas series, of course, Alone with You in the Ether. And I'm trying to think, is there anything else? I have another fan fiction that revolves around the multiverse. No other time loops, though. No, I don't think so. Oh, this is someone I got to meet in person, which is great. So why do I think so much about time? I don't know. I have always felt that I am very small. I'm just a tiny, tiny little speck in the universe, and I'll never understand how things work. But I like to try. And I like to, I don't know, time is just so interesting. I'm certainly influenced by having been a genre reader for much of my life. I would say that now the majority of what I read probably falls under literary or upmarket, in that I really enjoy, stories about friendship and love and family, and, sort of slice of life stories. I love a good story about a woman in crisis. But the foundation of what I read and write and think about is genre. So it's fantasy, it's gothic, it's horror. And, you know, those things, when we're talking about the supernatural or the paranormal, I feel like time is always part of it somehow. You know, it's weird. I don't know how to tell you like what I find interesting about it besides like who wouldn't be interested, I guess is my question. I guess, you know, you might be right. Mr. Blake, I don't think is that interested. He's not that into theoretical physics, and I am. He really enjoys the mechanics of physics, which is obviously not interesting to me. But yeah, I wish I had a better answer for that. I think maybe it comes from a self mythologizing kind of place also. That's like, what would have happened if I had these different opportunities? My life has so many little like branching off points where things could have gone differently. I did just watch Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I'm definitely living one of the better universes for sure. But it's just very interesting to think about what I could be doing in these other places. Or maybe I'm just depressed and that's why I think about time. It does have a little bit of a compulsive feel to it. So yeah, because all those time travel theory and Alone with You in the Ether is my theory, or it was an idea that I had and then I gave to Aldo. Um, so yeah, that doesn't answer your question at all. What else do we have? I recently discovered you. I'm halfway through the Atlas 6 and have to say I've never seen another author write characters quite like yours. I love them. Tristan and Nico are my favorites. I'm someone who has trouble bringing a character to life and making them complex. I was hoping if you don't mind sharing the process you go through to create and bring such amazingly complex characters to life. They check my frequently asked questions. Yeah, so this is something that's asked of me a lot, but I don't consider it a frequently asked question, maybe because I don't have a good answer. Today's theme is going to be unanswerable questions. Characters are the most important thing to me. They're the most interesting thing to me. So, and because I started as a fan fiction author, I do always come at everything I write comes from a character perspective. So it comes from what does this character want and what do they not want, and then like plot, if arguably I have any, follows from there. I am also fundamentally very interested in psychology and philosophy and what drives a person. These are the kind of ponderings I have. I think this comes from a place of reading so much like slice of life that I go into a book wanting to empathize with and understand the character I'm reading. I do like to think I take advantage of the separation between me, the author, the narrator, and the character, and who is telling the truth. I mean, I'm always telling the truth, but like the character almost never is. Lots of, I think I take, I take into consideration the idea that the character wants something that they're never going to confess to the audience. I also try to treat the audience as if they are another person who's present in the narrative. Like as the audience is watching, what are they taking out of it? So hopefully taken as a whole, that execution results in complex characters, but I don't think going in that there's like a way to make them complex. I think you just have to be able to answer the question, what does this person really want? What does this person want most? What do they not want? What are they most interested in avoiding? And what lies do they tell themselves? Because everyone does. I think maybe that might be the thing that is making them feel more fleshed out, is the fact that they are not just telling you the truth, that they have sort of different opinions on what the truth is, and they are all quite unreliable. I'm definitely always relying on my audience to make judgment calls about what the characters are doing. I find that I think my biggest disappointment in terms of criticism I read is when people are not adequately giving me credit. When people think that, like, I think a good example of this, you're only in Atlas 6, so, but there's a part in Paradox where people observe that I, the author, did something to a character. But that's not what you're supposed to be looking at when you read. I understand that, like, bookish social media has trained us to criticize the author. Our gut instinct is to think, what did the author do, and what could they have done, and what should they have done better, and what does the author think? But when you're actually analyzing fiction, you have to draw a layer of separation between the author and the character, and what is the character doing, and whether or not the author approves is not really relevant to the story. Like, what are you taking out of it? What are the characters' actions? What are they saying? What are they doing? Are those things fundamentally at odds? Is there a reason the character might have been built this way? The thing that happened to the character in the Atlas Paradox that people take issue with me for is not something I did to them. It's something that another character did to them. And I don't see enough interrogating why that character did that action, which is, you know, how people react to my work. I put the work out, and like, it's not mine anymore. It's yours to interpret as you will. But in terms of how I build characters, I am thinking about what should the audience feel at this point? What should they take away? And for me, it often is this like tension of, do we approve of what has just happened? Which doesn't really answer the question. It's a hard question. I mean, I really think that since character is the most important thing to me, it's the thing that I read books for. I am always most interested in the characters. I'm most interested in relationships and the different kinds of relationships that human beings can have. Because I pay the most attention to it, it is probably the thing I'm best at, because that's what it is. You become talented at the things that you are paying attention to and that you care about the most. So I don't necessarily know how to tell you to do it better. Like, if you want, things that I have learned how to do better are like, plot beats and stuff. And so those are the things that I've written blog posts about because I have more to say about it. Things that come naturally are really hard to just like explain off the cuff. You could have prepared an answer, Olivie. Yes, I could have, but I didn't. Okay, last thing. We just got a couple minutes, like 1 minute. Someone recently confessed romantic feelings to a friend who does not feel the same way, but they both care about each other and there's so much deep love. They think of themselves as platonic soulmates. I'd hate to lose this person, so we're staying friends. How do they channel this affection from a romantic path to a platonic one? How do I know this love I feel won't turn romantic? How do I keep it from being romantic? I think you basically, all intimacy is kind of a gamble. Basically, choosing to be intimate with someone is always a risk. And I mean that in terms of, emotional intimacy, not physical. You have to decide when you have these moments, I think love is built in intimacy. And when you have moments of like wanting to confide in someone, there are times when you have to decide this person is not the correct risk. Like, there are, I think, some conversations, some truths, some like emotional vulnerabilities that are best reserved for certain people in your life. Certain feelings are for someone who is romantically invested in you. And so I think that is the difference. Like, when you have a feeling like you want to have a really like deep and personal conversation, in order to prevent this relationship from crossing a line, you have to purposely choose not this person. Which I know is very difficult, especially if you are driven to share this sort of thing. But like, this is what happens in all of friends to lovers media, right? Is that like basically people, they share more with their friend that is later their lover than they share with their actual romantic partner. And so you have to do the same thing, is gauge, like, is this conversation or this need that you have, is it something that you should get from this friend, or is it something that you should get from someone you're in a romantic relationship with? Or should it be from a friend where you don't have the possibility of romance like hanging? Yeah, I've found that there are certain times when I feel that there is sort of a bridge where when you're getting to know someone, you could get more intimate with them. You could talk about yourself and how you're feeling. There are some times, I think, when a person comes to you with a situation they're going through, and you're essentially given like a couple of options, right? You could share something about yourself. You can share something with them because they shared something with you, and that could create a much deeper shared understanding between you. Or you can just be there for them and say, yeah, I get it, I feel you. And that is enough. That's probably enough to make them feel better without necessarily generating more love. You know what I mean? If you're just there for someone, then you have provided them a tool, but you haven't grown a garden together. And so I think that it comes down to decisions like that it's like, I'm going to hand them a shovel, but I'm not going to grow tomatoes. That was a classic not writing metaphor that didn't make any sense. But yeah, it's a rough place to be. I don't really do friends to lovers. I hate it, media. I really hate it. I think I've made that plenty clear, so I won't get into it. But yeah, I think that, so my best friend is a guy, and I think we've talked about this before, that like there were times when I would ask him, like, why hasn't anything romantic ever happened between us? And he would say, because the friendship was more important, because we chose the friendship, because we were purposely not crossing any lines that would make things confusing. So there was never any physical intimacy. There was never, anything. Yeah. There, like, I feel like where the line is, and when you're crossing it. So don't, because there are times when you want to cross it, and that's the gamble, right? Because you think that there's romance on the other side. But since you already know there's no romance, do not cross it. Choose the friendship. I think that's actually my best answer, is choose the friendship, and you won't have to worry about it. So yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, I think that's enough. I have chocolate cake to eat. I don't feel like great about me being helpful on my birthday. I always try. I would love to have given you something meaningful, but I don't think this was it. I would, so if you can read this, you should read this, because that's where my best offerings are. I think, yeah. I am definitely a cynic. I am not an optimist. And so writing this book was an exercise in trying to see the bright side, purposely trying, choosing the bright side. The theme of this video is choice and sweatpants. Happy birthday to me. I hope you've enjoyed the Atlas Complex cover. I think, so if this is my birthday, that means that I am transmitting the draft of the Atlas Complex tomorrow. Wish me luck. And then it becomes like a thing that really exists in the world. And as we move forward in edits, maybe I'll tell you more about it. I'm very pleased with it. It has increased a lot. She's a big book. But I think that once you read this book, you will understand what I mean when I say it's one story that I just like conveniently chopped into 3 parts. It's just one long story though. And I think a lot of the stuff that I have been wanting to say had to wait for this installment. So I'm really excited because I'm about to say it. Okay. Well, this has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next time.